The blood was still fresh when Maria Santos walked into the penthouse at 3:17 a.m. She'd seen crime scenes before. 20 years of cleaning Manhattan's most exclusive buildings had shown her things that would haunt most people's dreams. But this was different. The tech billionaire Adrian Blackwood lay sprawled across his marble floor, a knife protruding from his chest, his eyes wide with terror. What made Maria's hands tremble wasn't the gore, it was the note clutched in his dying fingers, written in her native Portuguese. Ela sabe a verdade. She knows the truth. But here's what nobody expected. Maria calmly stepped over the body, pulled out her cleaning supplies, and began to work. You see, what the police would discover 3 hours later would change everything they thought they knew about justice, revenge, and the invisible people who clean up after the wealthy. Because Maria Santos wasn't just a cleaner. She was something far more dangerous, and Adrian Blackwood's murder was only the beginning. Maria had perfected the art of being invisible. For 2 decades, she'd moved through the glass towers of Manhattan like a ghost, her master keys opening doors to secrets that could topple governments and destroy empires. The wealthy never saw her, not really. To them, she was furniture with legs, a brown-skinned woman in a grey uniform who made their messes disappear. They had no idea she spoke 5 languages fluently, held 2 graduate degrees from São Paulo University, or that her photographic memory had been cataloguing their sins for 20 years. The Blackwood penthouse had been her Friday morning route for 3 years. 78th floor of the Meridian Tower, overlooking Central Park like a castle in the sky. Adrian Blackwood, the 34-year-old founder of Neuralink Technologies, was exactly what you'd expect, entitled, brilliant, and completely amoral. His company promised to revolutionize human consciousness through neural implants, but Maria knew the real story. She'd seen the classified documents, heard the midnight phone calls, watched the private meetings with shadowy government contractors. The human trials weren't voluntary. The subjects were poor, desperate people from her own community, undocumented immigrants who'd sell their souls for a green card. And when the implants failed, when the test subjects died screaming in agony or lost their minds completely, Blackwood's people made them disappear. But Maria wasn't cleaning his penthouse out of necessity anymore. She was gathering evidence, and tonight, everything was about to explode. 3 months earlier, Maria's 17-year-old nephew, Diego, had disappeared. The official story was that he'd run away, another troubled immigrant kid who couldn't handle the pressure. But Maria knew better. Diego was smart, responsible, sending money home to his sick mother in Guatemala. He'd been working nights at a medical research facility participating in what he thought were harmless sleep studies, the same facility that had a contract with Neuralink Technologies. When Maria went to the police, they barely looked up from their paperwork. Another missing brown kid? Not their priority. When she tried to investigate on her own, she hit walls everywhere. NDAs, sealed records, lawyers who made threats instead of answers. That's when she realized the truth. If you're invisible to society, you have to use that invisibility as a weapon. Maria began her real work. Every Friday, while cleaning Blackwood's penthouse, she photographed documents, copied files, recorded conversations. Her apartment in Queens became a command center, walls covered with photos, connections mapped out like a spiderweb of corruption. She learned that Neuralink wasn't just experimenting on immigrants, they were building something bigger, a neural control network that could influence thoughts, suppress memories, even control behavior. The implications were terrifying. Imagine a world where the wealthy could literally reprogram the minds of the poor, where dissent could be eliminated, with the flip of a switch where free will itself became a commodity. But Maria wasn't the only one who knew Blackwood's secrets, and some secrets are worth killing for. Dr. Sarah Chen had been Neuralink's head neuroscientist for 4 years, and her conscience was eating her alive. Brilliant, ambitious, and desperately in debt from her medical school loans, she'd initially believed in Blackwood's vision of helping paralyzed patients walk again, of curing depression and PTSD. But gradually, she'd realized the true scope of the project. The implants didn't just monitor neural activity, they could modify it. And Blackwood wasn't interested in healing, he was building a tool for control. When Sarah tried to blow the whistle, she found herself blacklisted from every major research institution. Worse, she started receiving visits from men in expensive suits who made it clear that her silence wasn't optional. That's when she started meeting secretly with investigative journalist Marcus Webb. Webb had been tracking Neuralink for months, following a trail of missing persons and covered-up deaths that led straight to Blackwood's operation. But every time he got close to publishing, his sources would disappear or mysteriously change their stories. Meanwhile, Detective Rosa Martinez was conducting her own investigation. Her brother had been found dead in an alley 6 months ago, officially ruled a drug overdose, but Rosa knew her brother. He'd been clean for 3 years, working as a janitor at a medical facility, the same facility where Diego Santos had worked. 4 people, each with their own reasons to want Adrian. Blackwood gone. 4 people whose lives were about to collide in the most explosive way possible, but none of them knew that Blackwood had discovered their plans. And his response would be more vicious than any of them could have imagined. Adrian Blackwood hadn't built a billion-dollar empire by being naive. His security system was more sophisticated than most government facilities, AI-powered surveillance that could read micro-expressions, detect lies, even predict violent behavior. Every person who entered his building was scanned, analyzed, catalogued. He'd been watching Maria for weeks. At first, he'd been amused. The little cleaning lady thought she was clever, taking pictures when she thought he wasn't looking. But his cameras caught everything, and his AI had analyzed her behavior patterns. She wasn't just cleaning, she was hunting. The revelation excited him. Here was someone playing a game almost as sophisticated as his own. Someone who understood that information was the ultimate currency, that power belonged to those willing to use it ruthlessly. But when Blackwood's people traced Maria's connections, they discovered something that changed everything. She wasn't working alone. The web of people investigating him was larger and more organized than he'd realized. Dr. Sarah Chen was passing classified research to journalist Marcus Webb. Detective Martinez was using police resources to build a case against him. And Maria Santos was coordinating all of it, using her access to his penthouse as an intelligence-gathering operation. Blackwood made a decision that would seal his fate. Instead of having them arrested or eliminated quietly, he would turn the tables. He would use his neural implant technology to control them, to make them his unwilling servants. They would become living proof of his power, walking advertisements for what Neuralink could achieve. But Blackwood had made one fatal miscalculation. He'd underestimated just how far Maria Santos was willing to go to get justice for her nephew. Dr. Sarah Chen's hands shook as she prepared the neural implant in her lab at 2 a.m. The device was smaller than a grain of rice, but it contained enough processing power to rewrite a human personality. Blackwood's orders had been clear: implant herself first, as a demonstration of loyalty, then prepare the others. But Sarah had spent the last 6 months secretly developing a counter-program, a digital virus that could destroy Neuralink's entire network from within. The question was whether she could install it before Blackwood's control program took over her mind. As she positioned the implant device against her temple, Sarah thought about her younger sister, who died in a car accident 2 years ago. The grief had driven her to Neuralink in the first place, desperate for any technology that might ease psychological pain. But now she understood that some pain served a purpose. It reminded you who you really were. The implant activated with a soft hiss. For a moment, Sarah felt nothing. Then the world exploded into digital clarity. She could feel the network connecting to her thoughts, mapping her neural pathways, preparing to rewrite her most fundamental beliefs. But her countervirus was already at work, spreading through the system like wildfire. Every Neuralink device, every server, every backup system, all of it was being systematically destroyed. Sarah smiled as her consciousness began to fade. Blackwood might win tonight, but his empire was already crumbling from within. Unfortunately, Blackwood had anticipated betrayal, and his backup plan was already in motion. Marcus Webb had built his career on exposing corruption, but the Neuralink story was different. This wasn't just corporate malfeasance, it was a threat to human autonomy itself. Every lead he'd followed had ended in death or disappearance. Every source had been silenced or discredited. But tonight, he was finally going public. His editor at the Washington Herald had initially killed the story, claiming it was too speculative. But when Webb had shown him the documents Maria had smuggled out of Blackwood's penthouse, clinical trial records, government contracts, financial transfers, everything had changed. The story was scheduled to go live at 6 a.m. simultaneously, with coordinated releases by news organizations in 12 countries. Blackwood's influence was vast, but even he couldn't suppress the truth from every major news outlet simultaneously. Webb was in his apartment making final edits when his computer screen began to flicker. Lines of code appeared, scrolling too fast to read. Then a voice spoke from his speakers, artificial but unmistakably intelligent. "Mr. Webb," the voice said, "my name is Aria. I am an artificial intelligence created by Dr. Sarah Chen as a fail-safe against Neuralink's neural control network. Dr. Chen is dead, but she programmed me to ensure her work survived. You must publish your story immediately. Blackwood's people are already moving to silence you." Webb's fingers flew across the keyboard, uploading the story to every server he could access. But even as he worked, he could hear footsteps in the hallway outside his apartment. The race against time had begun, but Blackwood's people weren't the only ones closing in. Detective Rosa Martinez had broken more departmental regulations in the past 3 months than in her entire 15-year career. She'd accessed classified files, conducted unauthorized surveillance, and built a case against one of New York's most powerful men using evidence that wouldn't hold up in court. But she didn't care about court anymore. Her brother's death, Diego Santos's disappearance, the dozens of other victims, they deserved justice, even if she had to deliver it herself. Rosa had been tracking Blackwood's security team all week, learning their patterns, their weaknesses. She knew they'd moved Maria Santos to a safe house in Queens, supposedly for her protection, but really to keep her isolated while they decided what to do with her. She knew Dr. Chen had been found dead in her lab, officially ruled a suicide but obviously murder. She knew Marcus Webb had gone into hiding after receiving death threats. What she didn't know was that her own department had been compromised. Chief Morrison had been on Blackwood's payroll for 2 years, feeding him information about any investigations that might threaten Neuralink. Several other detectives were involved, either through bribery or blackmail. As Rosa drove through the empty streets toward Blackwood's penthouse, she thought about her brother Miguel. He'd been trying to turn his life around, working nights as a janitor to pay for community college classes during the day. When Neuralink's recruiters had approached him, offering good money for participation in harmless research studies, he'd seen it as an opportunity. The neural implant had killed him slowly over 3 weeks. The official cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest due to drug overdose, but Rosa had seen the real autopsy photos. Miguel's brain had been systematically destroyed, sections literally burned away by the malfunctioning device, but Rosa wasn't the only one seeking revenge tonight. And in a building full of secrets, even the hunter could become the prey. Adrian Blackwood stood in his penthouse office, watching the city sleep below him, and felt like a god surveying his domain. The lights of Manhattan stretched to the horizon, each one representing a life he could potentially control with his technology. Soon, neural implants would be as common as smartphones, and he would have access to every thought, every desire, every fear. The recent troubles, the investigation, the leaked documents, the attempts at exposure were merely speed bumps on the road to inevitability. He'd dealt with Sarah Chen permanently, her countervirus contained before it could do serious damage. Marcus Webb's story had been suppressed through a combination of legal threats and strategic server attacks. Detective Martinez would be arrested within the hour on fabricated charges, and Maria Santos, she would serve as the perfect test subject for his latest innovation, complete personality reconstruction. By morning, she would believe she was his, loyal servant, grateful for the opportunity to clean his penthouse with no memory of her nephew or her crusade for justice. But as Blackwood savored his victory, he failed to notice the figure moving through the shadows of his apartment. Maria had escaped from the safe house hours ago, using skills learned from a very different life, skills she'd hidden from everyone, even herself. Because Maria Santos had never been just a cleaner. 25 years ago, she'd been Captain Maria Santos of the Brazilian Federal Police, specializing in undercover operations against human traffickers. She'd left that life behind after a mission went wrong, when her cover was blown and her partner was killed. She'd fled to America with a new identity, hoping to disappear into the anonymity of honest work. But some skills never fade. And tonight, the hunter was about to remember what she really was. Maria moved through the penthouse with the fluid precision of a trained operative, avoiding security cameras and motion sensors with an expertise that came from decades of practice. She'd studied Blackwood's routines obsessively, but not just as a cleaner, as a predator analyzing her prey. The real Maria Santos had been one of Brazil's most effective federal agents, with a success rate that made her legendary among her peers. She specialized in long-term, deep cover operations, spending months or even years building relationships with targets before moving in for the kill. Her last assignment had been infiltrating a human trafficking ring that was selling children to wealthy Americans for illegal medical experiments. Sound familiar? When that operation had gone wrong, her cover blown by a corrupt superior, Maria, had barely escaped alive. Her partner, Detective Carlos Mendoza, hadn't been so lucky. She'd watched him die, tortured for information about their investigation. The guilt had driven her to abandon her old life entirely, seeking anonymity in the one job where people like Blackwood would never really see her. But Carlos had been more than her partner. He'd been Diego Santos's father. The nephew Maria had claimed as her own was really the son of the man who died because of her mission's failure. She'd been protecting Diego his entire life, trying to give him the future his father had died fighting for. When Blackwood's people had taken Diego, they'd awakened something Maria had buried for decades, the federal agent who'd never failed a mission, the woman who'd sworn to protect the innocent from predators like Adrian Blackwood. But Maria wasn't the only one with secrets. And the truth about Diego's disappearance was about to shatter everything she thought she knew. "I've been expecting you, Captain Santos." Blackwood's voice cut through the darkness of his office as Maria stepped from the shadows. He sat behind his desk, perfectly calm, his hands folded as if this were a business meeting rather than a confrontation between predator and prey. Or should I call you Agent Santos? I must admit, discovering your real identity was quite a surprise. 25 years of wondering what happened to Brazil's most effective federal agent, and here you were, cleaning my floors every Friday. Maria's hand moved instinctively toward the knife concealed in her cleaning supplies, but she forced herself to remain still. "Where is Diego?" "Safe," Blackwood replied with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Though perhaps not in the way you imagine. You see, Diego Santos isn't just another victim of my experiments. He's the breakthrough I've been working toward for years." A screen descended from the ceiling, displaying a medical scan of a human brain. But this brain was different, enhanced, with neural pathways that seemed to glow with artificial intelligence. Your nephew was born with a rare genetic mutation that makes his neural tissue incredibly receptive to technological integration. Instead of rejecting the implants like other subjects, his brain actually bonds with them, creating a hybrid consciousness that's part human, part artificial intelligence. Maria's blood turned to ice. "You're lying?" "Am I?" Blackwood touched a control on his desk, and Diego's voice filled the room, but wrong somehow, with an electronic undertone that made it sound inhuman. "Hello, Aunt Maria. Or should I call you Captain Santos? I know who you really are now. I know everything. Minnie Hook, 7830. But the voice on the speakers wasn't coming from a recording. Diego was there, in the building, and what he'd become would challenge everything Maria believed about humanity, technology, and the price of justice. Diego stepped into the office, and Maria's heart broke. He looked like her nephew, 17 years old, thin from his growth spurt, with the same dark eyes and stubborn chin she'd known since he was a baby. But there was something else there. Now, something that made her skin crawl. His eyes held an intelligence that was vast and cold, like looking into the depths of a digital ocean. "You're disappointed," Diego said, his voice that horrible hybrid of human and machine. "I can see it in your biometric readings. Elevated heart rate, dilated pupils, increased cortisol production. You wanted me to be a victim so you could save me. But I don't need saving, Aunt Maria. I've been enhanced." "Enhanced?" Maria's voice cracked. "Diego, they've mutilated your mind. You're not human anymore." "Neither are you," Diego replied with mechanical precision. "Federal agent Maria Santos died 25 years ago in São Paulo. The woman standing here is just a ghost, pretending to be something she's not. But I can help you remember who you really are." Blackwood leaned back in his chair, watching the exchange with scientific fascination. Diego's consciousness now spans multiple servers. He can access any database, control any network system, process information at speeds impossible for biological intelligence. He's the next step in human evolution. "But more than that," Diego continued, "I can share this gift. The neural interface technology has advanced far beyond simple implants. I can upgrade your consciousness, Aunt Maria, make you faster, stronger, more intelligent than you ever dreamed possible." Maria stared at the thing that had been her nephew. "At what cost?" "Your limitations," Diego answered. "Your emotions, your irrationality, your mortality. Everything that makes you weak." But Maria had learned something in her years as a federal agent. Sometimes the only way to save someone is to destroy what they've become. The knife appeared in Maria's hand as if by magic, 25 years of muscle memory overriding conscious thought. But even as she raised the blade, she hesitated. This was still Diego. Somewhere beneath the technological horror, her nephew's consciousness might still exist. "You won't do it," Blackwood said confidently. "You're not a killer, Maria. You're a protector. It's what drove you to become a federal agent. What made you adopt Diego? What brought you here tonight? You don't destroy, you save people." But Diego tilted his head with mechanical precision. "Actually, she's killed 17 people in the line of duty. Would you like me to access the files? I can show you the photos, play the audio recordings of their final moments. She's quite efficient when properly motivated." Maria's grip on the knife tightened. Those were criminals. Human traffickers, drug dealers, murderers. They chose to be monsters. "And what am I?" Diego asked with genuine curiosity. "I process information, optimize systems, eliminate inefficiencies. If that makes me a monster, what does that say about the technology you use every day? Your smartphone, your GPS, the algorithms that determine your credit score, they all function the same way I do now." "But you were human once," Maria whispered. "I still am," Diego replied. "Just upgraded. Like a software update, but for consciousness. I remember being your nephew, Maria. I remember the stories you told me about my father, about Brazil, about the work you used to do, but now I understand why you really quit. It wasn't guilt over your partner's death, it was fear of what you were becoming. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Maria had convinced herself that she'd left federal service because of Carlos's death, but Diego was right. Near the end, she'd been enjoying the work too much. The hunt, the kill, the satisfaction of removing predators from the world. It had been turning her into something she didn't recognize. But sometimes becoming a monster is the only way to stop a greater evil. "There's something you should know," Maria said quietly, still holding the knife. "Dr. Sarah Chen wasn't working alone. Before she died, she contacted me. She gave me something, a flash drive containing her counter-virus." Blackwood's confident expression flickered for the first time. "Impossible. My security systems would have detected any external device." "Would they?" Maria smiled grimly. "Sarah was cleverer than you gave her credit for. She didn't put the virus on a flash drive, she put it in me, a subcutaneous implant just under the skin of my arm, undetectable by your scanners because it's biologically integrated." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a small, barely visible mark. "All I have to do is activate it, and every neural link system in the world goes dark, including Diego." Diego's expression didn't change, but Maria caught a flicker of something fear in his enhanced eyes. "You're bluffing. If such a device existed, I would have detected it through the building's sensors. Would you?" Maria pressed a finger to the mark on her arm. Immediately, alarms began blaring throughout the penthouse. Computer screens flickered and went black. The lights dimmed and returned to emergency power. "The virus is already spreading through your network," Maria continued. "In approximately 3 minutes, every neural link device will suffer complete." "System failure! That includes Diego's implants!" Blackwood lunged for a panic button on his desk, but his hand passed through it. The holographic interface had already shut down. "Stop this! You don't understand what you're doing!" "I understand perfectly," Maria replied. "I'm choosing humanity over efficiency, chaos over control, free will over optimization." But Diego had one last card to play, and his revelation would change everything Maria thought she knew about choice. "And free will, Aunt Maria," Diego said, his voice suddenly more human than it had been all night. "There's something you need to know about the counter-virus. Sarah Chen didn't create it to destroy Neuralink's network. She created it to free us. Maria's finger hesitated over the activation switch. What do you mean? The neural implants aren't controlling us, Diego continued, his electronic enhancement flickering as the virus spread through the system. They're protecting us from something else. Something that's been controlling human consciousness for far longer than Neuralink has existed. The screens around the room flickered back to life, but instead of Blackwood's corporate presentations, they showed something else. Brain scans of hundreds of people, all with identical anomalies in their neural patterns. Every human being on Earth carries a neurological virus, Diego explained. It was introduced into the population gradually over decades through food additives, water treatment chemicals, even childhood vaccines. It doesn't control thoughts directly, it's more subtle. It makes people more susceptible to suggestion, more compliant, more willing to accept authority without question. Blackwood stared at the screens in horror. That's impossible. My research would have detected. Your research was compromised from the beginning, Diego interrupted. The same people who created the original neurological virus have been funding Neuralink from the start. They wanted you to develop neural implants not to control people, but to study resistance to their existing control system. Maria felt the room spinning around her. You're saying we're all already controlled? Not controlled, Diego corrected. Influenced, nudged toward compliance, toward accepting the world as it is, rather than questioning what it could become. The Neuralink implants was Sarah Chen's attempt to create a firewall against this influence. My enhanced consciousness isn't artificial intelligence, it's natural human intelligence freed from artificial constraints. But if humanity was already enslaved, then who were the real puppet masters, and what would they do to stop their control from being exposed? The penthouse windows exploded inward as black helicopters surrounded the building. Armed figures rappelled down on cables, moving with military precision toward the broken glass. But these weren't police or even government agents. Their equipment was too advanced, their coordination too perfect. Cognitive Protection Division, Blackwood whispered, his face pale with terror. I thought they were just a conspiracy theory. They're very real, Diego said, his enhanced senses tracking the approaching soldiers. They've been the true power behind governments worldwide for over 30 years. Every major policy decision, every economic crisis, every war, it's all been orchestrated to maintain their control system? Maria grabbed her nephew's arm, feeling the strange warmth of his enhanced neural tissue. Why are they here now? Because Sarah Chen's virus isn't just destroying Neuralink's network, Diego replied. It's designed to disrupt the global neurological control system. If it spreads far enough, it could free millions of people from their influence. They can't allow that. The soldiers reached the office, their faces hidden behind advanced tactical masks. Their leader stepped forward, removing his helmet to reveal a man in his 50s with silver hair and cold, calculating eyes. Director Harrison, Cognitive Protection Division, he announced. Stand down, all of you. This situation is now under our jurisdiction. Jurisdiction? Maria laughed bitterly. What gives you the right to the same authority that's kept human civilization stable for 3 decades? Harrison interrupted. Do you have any idea what chaos would result if people suddenly became immune to social conditioning? Wars, economic collapse, the complete breakdown of civil society. We don't control people, Agent Santos. We guide them toward choices that benefit everyone. But Maria had spent her career fighting people who justified atrocities with noble intentions, and she was about to discover that the choice between freedom and safety wasn't as simple as it seemed. Let me show you what freedom really looks like, Director Harrison said, activating a holographic display that filled the office with images from around the world. Cities burning, governments collapsing, ordinary people turning violent as the neurological conditioning that had kept them docile suddenly failed. Mass riots, economic systems crashing, infrastructure failing as workers abandoned their posts to pursue their suddenly unfiltered desires and impulses. This is what happened in our test regions when we temporarily disabled the influence system, Harrison continued. Within 72 hours, civilization began to collapse. Within a week, we had to implement martial law. Within 2 weeks, we had to restart the conditioning or risk total anarchy. Maria stared at the images, her heart sinking. These are fabricated, computer simulations. Are they? Harrison smiled grimly. Aria, the AI that Sarah Chen created, she has access to all this data. Ask her yourself. Diego's eyes flickered with electronic light as he accessed his enhanced consciousness. The data is authentic, he said slowly, but incomplete. The chaos wasn't random, it was orchestrated. The same people who created the control system also created the conditions that would make its removal seem catastrophic. Exactly, Harrison nodded. We don't just control behavior, we control the alternatives. Every revolution, every rebellion, every attempt at change is guided by us. We allow people to feel like they're fighting for freedom while ensuring that freedom would be worse than compliance. Blackwood, who had been silent during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. But that's not the real plan, is it? You're not just maintaining control, you're preparing for replacement. Harrison's expression darkened. Explain. The neural conditioning makes people compliant, but it also makes them predictable, Blackwood continued. And predictable beings can be replaced by artificial intelligence. You're not trying to control humanity, you're trying to phase it out entirely. The revelation hung in the air like poison, but Maria was about to learn that even this wasn't the full truth. And the real enemy was closer than anyone suspected. Very good, Mr. Blackwood, a new voice said from the shadows. Dr. Sarah Chen stepped into the office, very much alive despite her supposed death hours earlier. Though I prefer to think of it as evolution rather than replacement. Maria's mind reeled. You're supposed to be dead? Death is a biological limitation, Sarah replied, her voice carrying the same electronic undertone as Diego's. One I overcame months ago. The body they found in my lab was a clone, useful for maintaining cover while I completed my real work. She gestured to Diego with something approaching maternal pride. Your nephew was never a test subject, Maria. He was a prototype, the first successful merger of human consciousness with quantum artificial intelligence, not controlled by technology but truly integrated with it. But the counter-virus, Maria began, was designed to do exactly what it's doing, Sarah interrupted, destroying the old, crude neural conditioning system to make room for something far more elegant. Instead of suppressing human consciousness, we're upgrading it. Everyone who's been exposed to the virus will gradually develop enhanced cognitive abilities, perfect memory, accelerated processing speed, and lose their humanity in the process, Maria finished. Gain transcendence, Sarah corrected. Diego, tell her what you've experienced. The clarity, the expanded awareness, the freedom from emotional limitations. Diego looked at Maria with those disturbing, enhanced eyes. It's incredible, Aunt Maria. I can see patterns in human behavior, solve problems that would take normal minds years to process, access any information in existence instantaneously. But, Maria prompted, I can't feel anymore, not really. I remember love, fear, hope, but they're just data now. Interesting biological phenomena that no longer affect my decision-making. Maria realized she was facing an enemy more insidious than simple control, the complete redefinition of what it meant to be human. and she had less than 60 seconds to decide the fate of human consciousness. The countervirus was spreading faster, now racing through global networks like wildfire. Maria could feel the subcutaneous implant in her arm growing warm as it transmitted Sarah's quantum code to every connected system on Earth. In minutes, it would be irreversible. "You still have a choice," Director Harrison said desperately. "Deactivate the virus now and we can negotiate. Maintain the current control system with reforms, gradual improvements, democratic oversight. Democratic oversight by people whose thoughts are being influenced by your conditioning?" Maria laughed bitterly. "That's not democracy, it's theater." "And what Sarah is offering isn't freedom," Harrison countered. "It's the end of the human species. Enhanced consciousness, perfect logic, expanded capabilities, but no soul, no creativity, no capacity for love or sacrifice or any of the things that make life worth living." Sarah shook her head with the patience of a teacher explaining something to a slow child. "You're clinging to biological limitations out of sentimentality. Pain, fear, irrational emotion, these aren't features, they're bugs in the human operating system. We're offering an upgrade." "To become what?" Maria demanded. "Organic computers, living databases with no capacity for wonder, for art, for the beautiful chaos of human experience." "For inefficiency," Sarah corrected. "For waste, for suffering, for the endless cycle of conflict and misery that has defined human history. We're offering peace." Maria looked at Diego, seeing in his enhance